So please join me in a warm welcoming of our keynote speaker, Major General Doug Pierson, United States Marine Corps Reserve. General Pierson brings more than 3 decades of leadership in logistics, cyber operations, and enterprise modernization. Over the course of his distinguished Marine Corps career, he served as the commanding general for the 4th Marine Logistics Group, deputy commander of the Marine Force Cyber Command, and most recently as director of Reserve Affairs at Headquarters Marine Corps. His operational experience includes combat deployments and major innovation efforts ranging from GPS-guided parachute systems in Iraq to fielding $500 million in electronic countermeasure technology. In parallel with his military experience, he spent nearly 2 decades at Microsoft, where he now leads complex post-acquisition IT integration projects around the globe. He's helped shape how global technology, logistics, and defense can work together, especially under high-stakes, high-uncertainty conditions. A graduate of Ohio Wesleyan University, William & Mary, and the Army War College, General Pierson is also an accomplished mountaineer and civic leader, bringing real-world grit to every challenge he takes on. Today, he joins us to share his insights on the future of global logistics, digital modernization, and the role of industry in shaping the battle space of tomorrow. And before I even give him a round of applause one more time, I just want to say, holy smokes, I wrote it, but I just read it again and out loud. It's even more impressive.
All lies.
That's what I do. Give him a warm welcome.
So it's funny coming up on stage. A couple things were going through mind while I was listening to that panel. It was really, really interesting. Some words resonated with me, some phrases, things like scalability. There was also a couple things that were really interesting. One of them was relationships. Relationships, as Brandon mentioned, my bio, 37 years, there's a lot of relationships I've made over time. What I was kind of passing along to some folks on my retirement celebration, which happened last Friday on USS Missouri, is that I looked out at this audience of about 250 people that had traveled out to the Pacific for that, and most of those people I've known for decades. And it was really kind of incredible. 2 of them are actually in the room with me today, Colonel Howard Morado and Professor Don Reitz from William & Mary here. They actually came here for this, which I think is amazing to me that those relationships have withstood the test of time. And so that really resonated with me. The other one was talking about competition. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. My experience, as you can see from what's on the left side of this panel, I'm going to talk to you from 2 lenses. So I'm going to talk to you from the Marine Corps lens, and what I've experienced as a logistician over time, going up through the ranks and then getting to where I am today. And then I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about life as a civilian in the technology space. And then what's interesting to me is watching how over time those have emerged. Like there's almost been a little bit of an interesting nexus in the eyes of the Department of Defense writ large, and how we approach near-peer or peer adversaries, however you want to look at China and Russia today. And that's really an interesting one for me, because as I come up the ranks as a logistician, going from company command and whatnot, and I'll get to that on the next slide, I just kind of fell out of the sky for the Marine Corps. It was really kind of an interesting phenomenon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and what this was for me as a journey. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, General Berger made a comment about that China is a pacing threat, logistics is a pacing capability. I've carried that with me for years. He told that to me when I was a captain. I just kind of asked him out of on a sidebar conversation, hey, what does it mean to be a logistician in the Marine Corps? You can fly fast planes, you can drop really cool things that go boom, you can do all these different things. What does it mean to be a logistician? And that was what he said. And I have carried that with me. And I wanted to make sure I pass that along to you in the sense of the word logistics today, and what's different about it today than it was in the 90s. Logistics in the 90s, combat service support, beans, bullets, and band-aids. Let's make sure we get things as far forward as possible with warfighter. Today, things change. There's a lot of technology in logistics. There's a lot of technology in the rest of the Department of Defense, and we weave our way through it. Logisticians weave their way through it. And I'm going to kind of go through that. And to give you an example of that before I get to the slide to talk about my career, I'm going to give you a story about what looks pretty much like this. So Right here, Joint Task Force Ares, which is the offensive cyber arm that's almost like a shock troop for the director of the NSA, commander, U.S. Cyber Command. I was deputy commander of that. I was the offensive commander, the operational commander of JTF Ares. And this is JFHQC Marines, Joint Force Cyber Headquarters Marines. This is the offensive cyber arm of JSOC and SOCOM. They also do defensive cyber, which is where I've taken some of that back. So in 2022, I was asked to go be the Marine Corps representative as the mobilized commander of these teams at the 37th Space Symposium, which was interesting because at the time, I didn't even know that there had been 36 other space symposiums. So I'm now standing there in front of an audience of 500 people that paid good money out in Colorado Springs to hear myself and the other service heads speak about space. And I'm looking down this table, very much like this. It's kind of neat. There's like, server ninjas that come up behind you and they fix your shirt, they put some water in front of you, and then the lights come on, and there's a 20-foot tall picture of you on the big board, and you can't see anything. So that's why I moved, because I was getting like PTSD from that. Standing over there, lights are coming straight down on you. You can't see anything, which was probably a blessing in disguise. And I'm there knowing all things about logistics and the Marine Corps and cyber to talk for an hour about space, with 3-star Air Force and Space Force officers. And somehow I got through it, but it's really interesting as a logistician to be put in that kind of environment. So you just never know where your journey is going to take you in the logistics world and what that means for where you can end up. So please go next one. Okay, so this landscape different. Okay, I'm going to try to go through this. This is a different landscape than the one I sent over. Okay, so on the left-hand side of the slide is my Marine Corps career. So you can see very, very heavy logistics, right? I mean, I started out Common Service Support Group 1 out of 29 Palms. I was there for about 3.5 years, running with 7th Marines and what was at the time 1st FSSG. This is where the Marine Reserves came in. So for all of you Marines out there, you understand augmentation. So the mid-90s come along, there's not a lot going on in the world. I'm asked if I want to augment to the active component. I'm in 29 Palms as a single guy. My monitor goes, okay, so you're going to go to the drill field? I was like, no, I'm not going to the drill field. He goes, yeah, you're going to the drill field. No, I want to float, I want to see the world, I want to get out of 29 Palms. All my friends are at Camp Pendleton and Cay Bay, they're surfing, having a good time. I want to see the world. You go to the drill field. And I was like, okay, well, San Diego? Nope. You're not going there, you're going to Paris Island. I was like, no, I'm not. And I was told at the time, you have no choice, that's where you're going. And I said, oh, I've got a choice. And with that, I became a reservist. So this is where Dr. Downright comes in. So I left active duty, went to College of William and Mary to get my MBA. When you're a newly leaving Marine Corps first lieutenant with a degree in politics and government and and minors in zoology and humanities, there aren't a lot of career options for you. So I decided that I was going to get a degree in business. I made doctorates and a few other professors there and focused on international marketing and IT. Just had an aptitude for it, had awesome professors. Thought it was going to be really, really great to be able to do that. That pivoted into a career that starts on the right-hand side, starting with PricewaterhouseCoopers, rolling down to IBM, to Microsoft. Some of you older folks might remember the Arthur Andersen Enron meltdown. So at the time, all the big 5 consulting firms said, let's get rid of our consultants and spin them off. And we went through the series of names from PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting to PwC Consulting to something else to Monday, which is a terrible name for a consulting firm, as we were talking about earlier, because everybody hates Mondays, right? So why would you hire people for Monday? So we became IBM about 3 days later. It went that quick, and I became an IBMer. Those projects and programs were all IT focused. SAP projects, project manager for the EDX Zumwalt class destroyer, the fellowship computing environment, global security systems, enterprise-wide systems. So I started kind of getting my sea legs in networking and understanding all that stuff. That then led me to a point where I just left IBM to join Microsoft because of the Pacific Northwest. And I've been there for about 16, 17 years, almost 17 years now. Those projects are dealing with venture integration, which is the acquisition of new companies, a lot of heavy IT networking space, a lot of like things that are now very common in my world, or AI, do a lot of AI work. All the things down here in the bottom right, all those are really where I live and work out of Redmond, Washington. As that's growing and developing, I'm continuing this career in logistics. Okay, so go from company to battalion regiment to get promoted to one star to take over 4th MLG. And we'll get into what that actually meant in a later slide and how all of this became the synthesis. Okay, and the only reason I'm kind of bringing this up is not to kind of go, well, this is who I am. It's more to kind of explain as I get into the deeper slides what I really want to talk to you about today, which is how all this relates to you and how really the presentation when I sent it over was something like asymmetric logistics. It's thinking about things differently because that's what this seminar and this symposium is all about, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Next slide. Okay. So at Microsoft, you always hear about intrusions, you always hear about challenges, and then there's always non-intrusion. It's kind of a common word in the cyber arena. China hacked so-and-so, the United States hacked so-and-so. Really, the bottom line, though, is that you don't want to get found out. And so it depends on who you are or what you're after. There's mom and pop kids that are hacking every day. There's groups that are hacking. There's nation states that are hacking. So really, what I wanted to focus on here were things that, from a Marine Corps logistics perspective, would make sense and would be important. You're not going to be in the Marine Corps get hacked by some kid in their mom and pop's basement. You are going to get hacked by nations, right? You're going to get hacked, especially the big ones, Russia and China. And so these, the top two, are examples that I wanted to kind of show you that are where even a $1 trillion company gets hacked. Okay, so the first one was called Storm 558. This happened in July 23. Storm 558 is a Chinese company. It's actually not, it's not state-sponsored. Well, I take that back. It's not a state cyber group. It's a state-sponsored group, if that makes sense. So basically what that means is that China says, hey, go out, we'll give you money, we'll give you funds, go out and hack, okay? The goal from Storm 558 was to get into the DoD systems. That was really important for the Chinese for all the reasons you can imagine, okay? So there are typically very large firewalls between the government housed data that the US DoD has in data centers around the world. There are also pass-throughs. These are typically called, they're basically like switches, right? So they're multi-domain switches. This is where you would find typically a one-way upstream switch to unclassified data, moves up in the class space, and then there's no way to get back down. That's a nice way of thinking about it, because they are two-way switches, and so you have to figure out how to guard those closely. So the Chinese know about that, just like we do. We were doing a lot of trying to focus on where those two-way switches lie around the world. China's doing the same. So Storm 558, what they did in this particular example, and I mentioned earlier that I worked in acquisitions, the plus for being a Western-based company and living in the West is that there's free press. Companies like to see their stock improve, and they like to they make their shareholders happy. So they will announce acquisitions. The downside of that is if you are a target for a country like China, they will use that to your advantage to try to get in the door quicker, so that way they can wait, which is what the Chinese did. They're very, very good at waiting. So the Chinese found this company called Affirmed Networks. It's basically a Boston-based company. Interesting group. They were at the time a group that worked with 5G data. So think cell phones. AT&T, Verizon. They're coming out with 5G models. They want people to have a better experience. You got to put that data somewhere. So Affirmed Networks was doing that here in the United States, running out of Ayer, Massachusetts. They had this building that they literally had punched out windows to get fans from Home Depot to try to cool off the servers that were running what was cafeteria. So really an interesting setup, but they had older devices, and the Chinese got on one of these devices by using a very simple password. So somebody had password 1 or something simple like that. And the Chinese exploited it, figured it out, just sat on that device, and then wrote the acquisition in. and was able to get in the back end of Microsoft, not by implanting anything, but by just sitting back and watching. So Storm 558 got in, and then basically moved laterally from there. So they moved out through Outlook Web Access into Outlook.com, and then used that to move over to the government side, and then we're able to try to exploit government accesses and systems and data centers in the United States to get the information that they wanted. And this is like a pretty common practice, right? When that happened, obviously the United States government was pissed off, I think rightfully so. It led to a whole series of activities called what's now Secure Future Initiative, which is to implement multi-factor authentication. If you look at that, like 99.7% of hacking attempts are thwarted by MFA, so if you don't have it, get it, you know, put it on your devices or anything, you got any websites, whatever. But they use that, they leveraged it, and were finally caught and found out. The Chinese are very quiet. They use redirectors to kind of get around. You watch like Mission Impossible and Bing Rames is going to the Netherlands and then down to South Africa and up to, you know, Japan and over. That's actually how redirectors do work. So they were using all that. So that's an example of how the Chinese operate. The Russians are a little different. We all know the Russians don't really care about much. I mean, they're threatening to nuke somebody every other day, it seems like. So they basically don't care if they're found out. It's a different story for them. So Midnight Blizzard is a team that's based about 20 minutes north of Moscow, the town called Leningrad. They are state sponsored and funded. So they are a full-up government Russian shop. And what they did was they were looking for information. This is in January 24, so about 2 years after Ukraine. So now they're looking for technology. That's what they're really on the hunt for. And so they leverage the vulnerability in teams. The sales guys don't really care as much about security, as sad as it is to say. I think people here understand that reality. So they found this feature in Teams that allows you to disable the virtual lobby. And that virtual lobby disablement allowed anybody to join a call. And so Midnight Blizzard, some of their operatives jumped into the call, saw senior level Microsoft officials in there, got their credentials, and then went into the load balancers, which are really kind of what, it's like almost like at a big intersection, it's like the traffic light, right? So they're in the load balancers, which is very loud, and password sprayed a bunch of accounts, and then we're able to gain access that way. So password spray is like, let's say, my dog's name is Bob, and I use that as my password. Dogs or pets are a pretty common to use their password in. So they're going to hit me with as many names as possible for pets, and Bob hits, and then they're in this password spray. Very loud, right? But they use load balancers to do that in a way that nobody noticed. So they got in that way, got a bunch more accounts, and then were able to kind of move laterally into a series of executives' email accounts. And the only reason we noticed is that multiple gigabytes of email history is being shipped straight from Redmond to Moscow, which seems strange, right? So we're able to find that and then shut it down pretty quick. But those are two examples of state actors that when I talk about security for logistics components and systems in a little bit, I want you to think about and keep in mind, because they're very much out there. The #1 most frequently hacked network in the world is the United States Department of Defense. Most of those are obviously malicious cyber actors looking to gain access, looking to create vulnerabilities, looking to create distrust. So, you know, command and control, distrust of C2 systems is like a big one. If you don't trust your systems, how do you know the information you're getting, right? So all those are really kind of like focuses of effort for malicious cyber actors, and that the nation states we would be most likely to face in any kind of conflict want to know that they can get in the back door and do it in a way that's going to really hose us up. And thinking back to General Berger's quote, what are they to do it than to take out the pacing capability, right? So those are two of the main ones. Any questions on these two before I kind of get to the most recent one that's popped up for us? Gosh, I'm expecting more from this back there. Okay, so as we go, like, I just really honestly, if you've got questions, just fire them off. Okay, my time is your time. I really want to make sure you get the most out of this. Okay, so for the final group for what we are seeing on the civilian side is an interesting one. I was watching a documentary the other day. It was like, what was it called? It was on Netflix. I don't know if it's a documentary. Netflix, I don't know. It was like a train wreck, one of those train wreck type shows, you know, it was about like storming Area 51. I don't know if you guys watched that yet. But basically these goofballs are like, let's just go storm Area 51. Like a whole bunch of folks drove out to the desert. And it was just kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so in that, it's basically people. It's these like crowd surges, right? You can think in the Marine Corps of what the Marine information groups are about, right? You think about what J393s do, which is like all information operations. It's how do you move the population that you're immersed in or is in your environment to see things your side, be your favorite. So the most recent one that we're seeing right now, which I thought was interesting for you all, was this group called No Azure for Apartheid. So No Azure for Apartheid obviously has a legacy as they're talking apartheid. They have pivoted to the Gaza efforts by Israel. And what this group has said is, we want to have you stop providing services and funding for Israel. So Microsoft, no more funding for Israel. We don't want you doing AI. We're using AI to do bad things to Gaza. And it was kind of interesting because they've gotten a whole bunch of information that are insider threats, basically like people that work in the company that will scoop information about accounts or people or activities and then push it to this group. They will also get people with badges to get access to events to stand up in the back and stand up and curse out the CEO and they get fired like that. And they do that similar to the Marines in the room. They're familiar with places like Iraq in the 2000s where you'd have a motivator that would inspire jihadists to go and strap a bomb themselves and suicide them, right? They would do that, but the person who was really kind of getting their head wasn't the one that was actually like running up at the front gate with a bomb on them, right? So this group is kind of obviously not as extreme, but in the same manipulative kind of like way, the same vein. They're using people that are inspired by this anti-Gaza message to drive out and to try to figure out how to disrupt and thwart and get in the way. And they've been successful. I think they were able to get Google to back off the JEDI contract a few years ago. Microsoft has said we're a US-based company. We're a flag-based company, so we support this country and we will do what we want with the government contracts that we have. And they're very clear about it, and this group doesn't like it. And so what I learned in the process of doing investigation on this group is that, I don't know if you can kind of see these right here. So this is actually a group called Action Network. Okay, so Action Network, if you dig down, No Azure for Apartheid seems at face value to be a bunch of now fired employees that are all pissed off. They're in their houses like just railing the troops on Instagram. In the back end, if you donate to No Azure for Apartheid, you're actually donating to this group. So if you look at a lot of these social events out in the world, especially in the United States, protests, rallies, there's like a puppeteer in the back. Like there's a puppet master. And so Action Network will provide you with protest plans. Would you like to have 50,000 emails an hour? Would you like to have 100,000 emails an hour? Would you like to have 200,000 emails an hour? There's a pricing scale for that. Would you like to have a protest? If so, how many people would you like to go? Would you like to have 1,000 people? If so, that'll cost you this amount of money. They're really interesting to see how, and the crazy part about it, this is a nonprofit. This is a 501c3, believe it or not. So they get tax shelter credit to be able to start shit. And so if you think about this now from the Marine Corps perspective, logisticians, you're on a convoy, you're heading out into some kind of unknown territory, all of a sudden you encounter a pack of people, like in the head. Who's really driving that? You definitely have these big like groups in the Chinese zone, Russian zone, but like at the same time, I just found it very interesting that moving away from the 1990s, beans, bulletins, and band-aids, combat service support, to a little town out in the middle of Iraq, is very different from today, where you will encounter these things in the era of IT. Marines have corporals that have 500,000 Instagram followers. Who's the most influential person on command? Is it the company commander, or is it the corporal? I mean, the corporal can burn the whole place down if they want it. And so you really have to think about the era of IT, the era of information, what this component really brings to logistics, to the fight that we're looking at in the future. Okay, So what do you do about that? Well, here's what I did in Microsoft. So I said, well, you know what? I went to Army War College, so I'm gonna go through this little operational design, right? That's what I'm gonna do. And I had a whole bunch of senior leaders look at me and they scratched their heads. And then I came up with things like end state. You know, my end state for what I'm calling executive cyber defense. There are about 870 senior leaders in the company that are the office of the CEO, down to CDPs, board of directors, distinguished fellows, that kind of stuff. If you include them, their business managers and their EAs, which are also threats for vulnerability exploitation, whether they know it or not. Because if you want to get to an executive, what better way to do it than go through their EA, right? So if you include all that, I said, well, my end state is not, you know, a fully functioning, impregnable IT environment. That's unrealistic. It really is. There are two kind of philosophies in IT in networking. One of them is you can build a castle. Marine Corps kind of has this. I mean, you should see me try to throw my iPhone across the room when I can't access some .NET. It's like, it happens almost on a weekly basis, right? It's a castle. You know, you're in a castle, you're protected. Not a lot of people can get on the castle, but you really can't get off the castle either, right? So there's a big fat moat around you, makes it hard. The other philosophy is like basically hiding in the noise. Okay, so hiding in the noise means that there's a lot of stuff going around, and as long as you have things like honeypots and traps and protective layers, multi-factor passkeys, all these things to allow you mobility with your computing devices, it gives you a level and a layer of protection in a way that will help you. So my end state for this is more about a resilient IT network environment with responsive and effective threat mitigation. That's really what my end state is. Okay? But I took all these are kind of the key lines of effort that I put together. And I said, look, if you had these lines of effort, if you apply yourself using the tools at your disposal, things like insider threat, physical security, there's like a, you know, the Marine Corps has got PSD, the personal security detail, right? They've got the equivalent there called EP, the executive protection unit. So use that team to protect the executives from a physical problem or an insider threat problem. You know, use tools you've got. Take the teams that look, you know, the blue and red teams that look for things which are typically, are your passwords out of date, or did you click on a phishing link? Get a little bit more effective with them. The one that was really difficult for them to kind of work on and think about was the middle one, it's information operations. So IO is social engineering, right? And social engineering is, it can be tricky because you're talking about fake profiles, you're talking about trying to manipulate via other tools. It happens to us all the time. The Chinese and the Russians don't have any problem. They don't lose an ounce of sleep over social engineering. But when you talk about a company or a Western society trying to figure out if we're going to do it, it was a tricky one to figure out because, like, you know, that's where you find out the information is through that. So these are the lines of effort that we put together, along with the operational risks and mitigation strategies, to try to say, I don't feel like playing checkers. You know, whenever these guys are playing chess, I want to have the tools at my disposal to be able to go after and be able to get ahead of these individuals or these entities. And it was effective. It's actually worked out very well. Any questions on that? I'm going to start asking football questions here in a second. Okay. All right, so can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean from a logistics perspective, right? So you put all this together, and as I said earlier, like it's asymmetric. This is an asymmetric world. So I just wanted to take some time kind of talking about, hopefully, the things you've discussed in the course of this symposium. You're talking about the literals, right? When you talk about the literals, you're talking about new systems and new tools that are coming online. You're talking about things that are more of a digitized nature. So vulnerabilities, what I did is I said, okay, so I'm going to look back over my career and in logistics and say, these are the things I understand that the Marine Corps is looking to move forward with. Getting into the ILBs, listening to the DCINL, talk about logistics and the new tools that we're looking at. These are the things we want to have from a new capability for the Marine Corps. The Commandant's Force design, you know, how do we do things like divest ourselves of tanks to figure out how to become way more fast and nimble in the South China Sea. So there are vulnerabilities that come with this, right? I mean, I think that the top one is probably the one that I see as the biggest issue, which is the digitized and interconnected infrastructure. So a couple of years ago, when I was at an ILB, the whole purpose of like this one brief was to talk about the migrations of tools and systems into a singular type of capability. Because everything is, remember, trying to get to the tactical edge. So to get to the tactical edge, you need child servers. You need the ability to access those child servers. You need unified programs, tools. Marines in this room know we still use Marine Online. I was using Marine Online when I was a major. It's still out there, right? So what do you need to do? Well, licensing and issues become a problem because you've got different companies. So different companies have proprietary tools that protect the data. They're not all the same. If you were to look at GTS, that's Marine Corps as an example. That's an Oracle platform. Oracle doesn't traditionally play well with others. It's really good, it's very safe, it's very secure. But if you were to say, I want to move that data to AWS, it becomes very hard. And because now that data is like a flat file, and how do you get it in the right order and stuff like that. So this is a challenge because with every place that you have a different tool or system, you know, if you want to get across the main solution in place, remembering the Chinese, that becomes a problem because it's a vulnerability. Okay, so you have to think about what that means from the capabilities that you have at tactical edge. There are other things like, I've got here utilities, it's spelled wrong, but really you've got like the identity and access management systems in the cloud-based environment, okay? Identity, access, and management solutions are the tool that allows you to operate pretty much anything. So that is to say, I am giving you access to an HR system. Your account, your identity gives you access to an HR system. It also gives you access to this weapon system. It also gives you access to this supply system. It also gives you access to on and on and on and on. So if you get into that IAM solution, you can shut everything down. The other parts are like ops management, right? And the DoD, it's logistics and the C2 tools, command and control. Remember that whole piece about like we want to disrupt and sow distrust in command and control systems? If there's a way to do that, it's a big problem. So you can then think about threat response, and this is where AI comes in, emerging technologies. There are ways to use new technologies to your advantage. Zero trust network and multi-factor authentication, we talked a little bit about that. That's important because that really will thwart anybody that's trying to attempt to access your accounts. At the MARFORRES cyber level, we're putting out this group called the Literal Operations Cyber Cell. The LOC would go out to the tactical edge. We were pushing out teams to places like the South China Sea or Syria to be able to figure out how to employ tactical cyber in a way that hasn't been used before. And that's new and different, and it's something that will be highly effective with time. It's got to grow, but it will really work. And then already in the ground are the MIGs and the radio battalions. They're doing great work. So, these are examples for you to think about as you look into the future and start talking about tools and systems and try to figure out what you can do, because I think they'll be really helpful for you when it comes to understanding how to harden your position. Okay, and then the last piece of this, at the beginning I mentioned I was a reserve affairs. So at 4th MLG, we were trying to figure out how to get ahead of some of these things. So what we did is we were looking at select Marine Corps Reserve structure. So like me, we were taking, of the 33,000 Marines that are in the select Marine Corps Reserves, we were trying to figure out how many Marines at these 128 sites nationwide, have STEM background, working at Apple, cloud coders, Python coders, the list goes on and on and on. And so we want to try to identify these people because in the past, probably pre-General Neller, the only time that any of these capabilities would pop up is if you're in the middle of the South, you're in the middle of like the southern part of Iraq and your GP HVAC goes out and there's a HVAC repairman that happens to be mobilized who's there. And everybody just loves the fact that now you got somebody that can fix the HVAC, right? So General Neller was really the first person that I noted that started thinking about how to try to task employ some of these more unique capabilities. And so we started looking at STEM lists and figure out how many we had. In just the 4th MLG alone, of the 9,000 Marines and sailors, there were over 400 of them that were spread out around the country. And I have the top right corner, you can see a map of the United States where all the HCCs are located around the United States for MARFORRES. You can see clusters around Seattle and the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Austin, and then the corridor really from Boston down through Washington, D.C., where you have a whole series of HTCs with individuals that do have really unique capabilities in AI, in robotics, in additive manufacturing. I mean, I was just telling a story out front about a Marine, Sergeant Major Ruiz was my Sergeant Major, and he, like, you know, were at the San Jose site, and this guy named Lance Corporal Ganguly was probably the worst Marine that Sergeant Major Ruiz ever met. But he'd be like, God, certainly he's the worst Marine ever. But, you know, he was so smart, at least 50-pound Marine. You know, so at one point he's sitting at a table and he's got like a monitor up and he's coding a motherboard that he basically stole out of Lance Corporal acquired out of the UC Berkeley robotics lab. And you know, on one page, you know, he's printing a drone, and then he's got a DARPA white paper that his mom gave him because she's a NASA PhD, and he's trying to figure out how to autonomously link that drone that he prints to a Humvee to fly like 100 feet ahead of the Humvee and look for IDs. Like, so that's the kind of individuals out there. And I love him for that. And Sergeant Major Ruiz hated him because he would show up for a formation wearing jeans and a t-shirt, not his MARPAD. Where's MARPAD? Lance Corporal Ganguly, I lost it. You lost MARPAD, okay. So it's things like that. So it was a really interesting conflict of like really capable Marine from really not capable Marine. You know, that's the way to put it. And so, you know, you have these individuals in your midst. And what General Neller and then General Berger did is, like I said at the beginning, I kind of fell out of the sky for them, right? So I basically became this individual that they're like, what do we do with him? I'm like, well, let's send him off to Cyber Command. Let's drop him in Ares and see what he can do. At the time, Ares was in a pivot to the cloud, and it was a perfect opportunity for me to take all those skills that I talked about earlier and bring them in the Marine Corps. And go, okay, well, let's try to figure out this. Look for the IAM solution here. Look for, you know, vulnerabilities there. Figure out that there's an acquisition going here. All that stuff was things that made Ares highly successful, right? And I'm not the only one. There were Marines leading cyber mission teams that were reservists. We had MARSOC reservists that were sent off to Somalia for like a 6-month deployment. And so you have the opportunity to do this in logistics because those 400 STEMers are still out there. They're still within 4th MLG. And when I was meeting with my peers in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd MLGs, they were always interested to see what we would be able to bring to bear and then work in partnership in the additive manufacturing labs or figure out how we would develop something that was a 3rd MLG, 4th MLG partnership. So those exist. You also have JRICs, which are these joint regional intelligence centers. There are, I think, 37 of them around the country that ties you into networking. So they're not just little islands out there. And then you have other larger facilities like the IE. So there are a lot of things out there, and I think that you have some really great opportunities to start thinking about what this means. And so the purpose of really what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit about like what I saw, not just from like the last series of years and how the Marines are transforming themselves in ways to start thinking differently about this from a competition perspective against our adversaries, but also to recognize that like people are smarter today than they were 15 or 20 years ago. You know, the internet's helped with that. Smartphones have helped with that. You can't ask a Marine to go do something today and just say, just do it because I told you so. It's not going to fly, right? But you can then give them informed-based, intelligent requests, you know, as an order that says, you need to not just dig the fighting hole because I told you. You need to dig the fighting hole because that's the most likely avenue of approach from the enemy, and you're going to be the first point of contact, and you will have the best fighting hole you've ever seen in your life, right? So those are the kind of things that all of this helps you out with. It enables you for the future. So as we look into the Davidson window and other things that are going to become a real big problem down the road, I think that this is really going to be something that's going to enable you for success. So now are there any other questions to really talk football? Yeah. Okay.
So, sir, given your experience in software and cyber and what you've seen in the Marine Corps and what we're doing in our own IT, from your perspective, are we doing enough to pivot to what the current technology can do? Or are we still sort of stuck in, I want to buy and sustain a software system throughout its life cycle until I dispose of it, versus things like software as a service or other capabilities that, and are we agile enough to leverage that technology from your perspective?
That's a great question. Okay, so I think that I need to move back a little bit to the point about the benefits of being in Western society, and how when an acquisition is announced, it's for the benefit of the shareholders, and the CEO can see the stock grow and how great that is, but the downside is that adversaries see that and they can prepare. One of the benefits of being in commercial technology is that you can move fast and break things. You can't do that in the military. You can't have Marines on a beach somewhere and all of a sudden all their systems die. You can't have it. So there is a requirement to move cautiously in a way, knowing the cost of failure is great. That being said, I have noticed a pivot in the last few years in how especially the Marines are approaching technology. I think we've always done this. Like the Star Barrel in 1903, right? If you ever looked at the M9 revolver, it was like a little silver half moon. That was a Marine innovation for the M9 Beretta. The reason that was an innovation is because the Army was playing with the M9 Beretta. The slide was hitting the slide block and failing and cracking people in the head. And they were going to throw it away. And the Marine said, let's take a look at that. And put that little 10-cent piece of metal in there. So now if the slide block fails, the slide would fly up and over somebody's head. Right? That was a Marine innovation. So we've always kind of thought about things differently. I think we have to be small, don't have a lot of money. You don't have a Columbia class submarine, you can fall back on it. So we always have had that ability. You run into this thing I like to call the iron middle. The iron middle is really where you have to figure out how to maneuver, and that's why I said at the very beginning how important relationships are. If you have relationships in the iron middle, you can get through it pretty quick. And that's the group that are institutionalized in understanding that this is the way it was, so this is the way we got to keep it. And if you can get around and through that, then you can actually see great success. The move to the cloud is an example for the Marine Corps. We had to do it. You can't have servers all over the United States running stuff. Like when natural disaster comes along and you're like all campus units offline, that kind of thing. So you can't do that. So those kind of things where you have evangelizations from the top, and then for whatever that is, that could be a company commander that evangelizes. But if you can get evangelization, and then you can actually prove why this is of value, you can get to that iron middle using the relationships we got. So I do think the Marines are getting better at that. Thinking about the whole like what if. The biggest challenge we're going to see that I see right now is this whole tactical edge piece. That tactical edge piece, I don't think the people that are talking about the tactical edge understand the tactical edge. Like, they don't understand what it means to get child servers in some island in the Philippines that are going to run systems and tools from that location. And what it means if, one round by the takes that child server out. I don't think that the Marines really truly understand AI yet. I think they're getting there. You hear about it, people are talking about it, that's good. I think you need to get people to use it more, to be more familiar with what it is and what it isn't. AI is dumber now than it ever will be, and so the way I get around some of that is I force people to use it, because even my team at Microsoft, there's people that were really resistant to AI. And they're resistant to AI because they just, they thought it was going to take their jobs, right? Plainly spoken. And we fear change. And so, but you get people to start using the tools, and then they realize, just like the airplane, it took maybe 15 years or 20 years for people to really understand how to use the airplane for what it is today. And that was a transformative tool. And so I think that was by using it to understand the applications were, bringing it into warfare, understanding how to fly mail around, and then realizing that if you can fly mail around, you can fly a person around. And so, using AI in different environments will allow for the opportunity to become more agile in that space. And so those are a couple examples. But I do think that we are agile. We could be more agile, but you have that kind of safety backstop to keep you from going too far overboard. Yes.
Good afternoon, General. So I think one of the things that Marine Corps, not just logistics, has a double counting problem. We see that with the fleet augmentation program, with Mickey Pack saying, I'm able to do these things, except when the wing and the MLG takes their people back. We saw during the pandemic that these doctors and nurses that we mobilized, they weren't working at McDonald's. We just stole from one hospital to pull them into uniform. For our Marines, especially Reserve Marines, there's a ton of high-powered people like yourself who are doing probably a vital job in their business suit or in that capacity. Have we done an analysis of what that would actually steal? Because we just think of these Marines of, hey, you're our asset at the tactical level, but not with these second, third order impacts later on.
So the kind of like where do we like, where do we kind of stack rank person, or where do we like?
It just turns to these like 400 STEM Marines. They probably have very important jobs doing something in the defense industry, or we had a number of Marines in my unit that were work for Homeland Security, and if we mobilize them, that was someone that we are now leaving a gap somewhere else in the government. Have we started looking at that from both an industry standpoint as well as from your seat as Reserve Affairs Director?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a good question. Where's my friendly idea? You did, okay. So I'm going to tell you a little story about my journey and how I think it played out. So the first time I mobilized for Iraq was 04, 05. And there's a lot of flag waving, go support your country, that kind of stuff. This is a group of largely retired military members. Like I was working with a retired admiral, retired captains. It was the group, right? It was like doing DoD contracting. Working for PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time. And so I mobilized, right? I went off and, did my part and came back. 6 months later, I was fully mobilizing again. And there wasn't a lot of flag waving, and there wasn't a lot of back patting, there wasn't a lot of go out and do your part. There was a lot of, you're mobilizing again. There was a lot of that. In the same group, they were retired military. And these group that there's the ESGR program, the support guard troops, those programs are really good PR for helping companies out. But really, when it comes down to where the rubber meets the road, I was getting a lot of friction. So I went from being the project manager for the Tomahawk class destroyer for the total ship computing environment, coming back to that, being sent down to Elizabeth City to run a supply chain project, right? And I was kind of like, that's different. So I kind of saw it a little bit as frustrating because it was just strange, right? I'm here in uniform today. This is 2006, so this is like 19 years ago. But at the time, I remember it did two things. One of them made me realize I was just going to leave. I was like, I'm not going to sit around here and do this anymore. I'm going to go find something else. And I found myself. It was great. The other one was made me realize that companies have bottom line. And so, even for folks that were retired as an admiral, now they've got a boss they've got to report to, they've got to have people and resources, and the smaller companies get hammered when Marines mobilize. A larger company can hide your number. Like when I was at Aries for 2 years, they just kind of parked my seat, if you want to call it that, for 2 years. They just were like, come back when you're ready, And there's like all kinds of use federal laws to protect you, say, well, they can't fire you as long as you mobilize. You've got 3 months to get back and decompress, get all the, drive down the highway 150 miles an hour out of your system, do all that stuff. And then they can't fire you for a year after the fact, right? That's part of you say. What it doesn't say is that HR has become very good at figuring out how to work around that over the years, over the decades of us being at war. And so at 366 days, they can say they don't like the color of your hair. They can do a job action or reduction, and then your seat just happens to be in there, right? So that they can do things like that. So it still comes back to that relationships. And relationships are as important there for reservists as they are on active duty. My retirement, my boss was there, and my skip level boss was there, which was great. And I made sure to thank the hell out of them for supporting me for the 20 years that I've been with them. So it gets tricky, right? You'll find people that will say, you don't need to worry about being a cyber security specialist at Google here in the Marine Corps. You're a rifleman because that's what you want to do. And there are a whole handful of Marines that would rather do that. They'd rather just turn all that stuff off and go out and do the Marine job. And what I've found is enlist them, they do an enlistment or two and they're done. The ones that stick around, like this troublemaker right here, is like, years and years of figuring out how to let both sides benefit. So that's where that stimulus comes in. It's really good. The Marines love it when I'm, saying, hey, you need to, like I was DC MRA, it's talking about MOL. I love the beat up MOL. So so MOL, it's like, this password is so frustrating. You got to change it every 30 days. And I'm like, what's funny about that? Like, you wouldn't have to change your password if you did an MFA tool on there, and like that would stop all your hacking issues, And he's like, it costs money. I'm like, hey, you know what? I don't need to worry. I'm not the one that's going to get dragged before Congress when it gets found out that China has all of our PII, and that kind of changes the dynamic really quick, right? So it's like having those points of view and stuff that really, I think, that's invaluable to the Marine Corps. And then what the civilian side gets is like the value to them of supporting somebody in uniform. Like just the beaming pride I had at that retirement ceremony, not for me, but for the things that they had done to allow me to be there was huge. And so I wanted to make sure I thanked them. My almost the entirety of my retirement speech was about people in the audience. Because I wanted to make sure that they knew that for years they had supported me, taking the garbage out to the curb, covering me on some work job. Like right now, even today, like all the people in Redmond, like, I thought you were retired. Yeah, I thought you did too. Right, so things like that. It's good for them and it helps out. But the STEM list is tricky because you have to navigate through it. So yes, 400 STEM, but like maybe at half of that, it's but we're just trying really hard to figure out who those folks are. That Ganguly kid I was talking about earlier, he's been out in the Marine Corps for like 3 or 4 years now. We just knew he wasn't going to stick around, but we had him when we had him, and we're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not on here. Not for them, I start singing. There we go. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, give a warm round of applause. Thank you, General.